Everything you run from, every fear you bury, every truth you deny, that's where your real self is hiding. To meet your true self, you must face everything you've avoided. Self-knowledge is dangerous but liberating. It's the kind of danger that doesn't destroy you, but dismantles every false image you've ever believed about yourself. The deeper you go within, the more illusions die, and with each illusion that falls away, a truth emerges, raw, uncomfortable, and yet more real than anything you've known before. To truly know yourself is not to add more layers, but to strip them away one by one until nothing false remains. You begin to realize that much of what you call me is a collection of borrowed identities, expectations from society, opinions from family, beliefs from culture, fears from childhood. You've been shaped by the world before you even knew you were shaping yourself. You've built a self not from truth, but from survival. And that self, though necessary once, becomes a prison as you grow. Self-knowledge demands that you look at this prison with open eyes. It forces you to confront the question, who am I when everything I've built around me falls apart? The answer rarely arrives with comfort, because to know yourself is to watch everything you thought you were begin to die. The person who sought approval, the one who performed for love, the version of you that needed validation, all must crumble. Each layer removed feels like loss, because it is, but beneath every loss lies something purer. The essence that was never touched by fear, never dependent on others to exist. The danger lies not in knowing yourself, but in what self-knowledge demands you sacrifice. You will lose certainty. You will lose belonging. You may even lose the approval of those who only knew your mask. But liberation waits beyond the ruins, because once you've faced the truth of what you are not, you no longer live enslaved by what others expect you to be. The opinions that once controlled you lose their grip. The noise of comparison quiets. You stop chasing acceptance because you begin to accept yourself. This process isn't gentle. The deeper you go, the more you see how much of your life has been lived unconsciously. You start noticing how you've run from pain by burying it under distractions, work, relationships, achievements, anything to avoid silence. But self-knowledge thrives in silence. In that stillness, you hear the voice you've ignored all along. The voice that tells you the truth you didn't want to face. It reveals that much of your suffering wasn't caused by the world, but by your resistance to seeing things as they are. The ego clings to control, but the soul longs for truth. And truth is ruthless in its clarity. There's a moment when you go deep enough that everything external loses its power. You begin to understand that nothing you achieve, own, or display can define you. The world teaches you to identify with form, your appearance, your title, your possessions. But when you start to see through these illusions, they lose their meaning. You realize that the real you is not the image you've built, but the awareness behind it. That awareness existed before success and will remain after failure. It's the observer that watches the rise and fall of everything you thought you were, and yet this realization isn't just intellectual, it's existential. It shakes your foundation, because if you are not your identity, then who are you? If you are not your past, your name, your story, what remains? That's the terrifying beauty of self-knowledge. It pulls the ground from beneath your feet so you can finally see that you were never standing on solid earth to begin with. You've been walking on illusions and mistaking them for reality. The journey inward will confront you with your shadow, the parts of yourself you've rejected, the emotions you've disowned. You'll meet your anger, jealousy, fear, and shame, and realize they were never your enemies. They were messages, calls for understanding. Each dark emotion you face transforms from an obstacle into a doorway. What once looked like poison becomes medicine, but only if you're brave enough to taste it. To know yourself is to stop dividing the mind into good and bad, acceptable and unacceptable. It's to embrace everything within you as part of the same whole. And as illusions die, a strange peace begins to rise. Not the peace of ignorance, but the peace of truth. You stop needing to pretend. You no longer feel compelled to impress, to prove, to perform. You start to live from a deeper center, one that doesn't depend on the ever-changing conditions of the world. You discover that liberation doesn't mean becoming someone new. It means remembering who you were before the world told you who to be. But the liberation that follows truth is not light and effortless. It carries a weight, the weight of awareness. Once you see, you can't unsee. Once you wake up, you can't go back to sleep. The illusions that once protected you can no longer hold you, and there's both grief and grace in that. You begin to mourn your old self, the innocent ignorance, the comfortable lies, the false security. Yet even in that mourning, you feel something powerful, the quiet joy of authenticity. You start to live more consciously. You notice your reactions instead of becoming them. You question your thoughts instead of believing them. You take responsibility for your emotions instead of blaming others. And with every act of awareness, the old identity loses its dominance. You stop being a puppet pulled by unconscious patterns and start becoming a participant in your own transformation. The deeper you go within, the more you see that freedom was never about changing the world outside you. It was about changing your relationship with yourself. You see that peace doesn't come from controlling life, but from understanding it. You learn to sit with uncertainty, to accept impermanence, to love what is without needing it to last. This is liberation, not escape, but awakening. And so, self-knowledge remains the most dangerous and the most freeing journey a human can take. Dangerous because it destroys illusion. Liberating because it replaces illusion with truth. You lose who you thought you were, but you find who you truly are. Your shadow holds the key to freedom. It is the part of you that you have tried so hard to silence. The emotions, impulses, and memories you deemed unworthy of love. Everything you suppress, your anger, envy, fear, is not your enemy. These are not signs of weakness or proof of failure. They are fragments of power waiting to be understood, not destroyed. The shadow is not evil. It is misunderstood energy. It carries the pieces of yourself you had to bury to be accepted, the truths you had to deny to survive. And until you make peace with it, you will never be whole. From the moment you are born, you begin dividing yourself. You learn what earns love and what brings rejection. You notice the faces that smile when you behave well, and the frowns that appear when you don't. Slowly, you build an image, the version of yourself that's acceptable. The rest of you, the wild, emotional, chaotic parts, you push down into darkness. You convince yourself they are gone. But the shadow never disappears, it waits. It waits for the moments when your guard is down, when life presses you too hard, when your conscious self can no longer contain the storm. Then it erupts. In anger, in jealousy, in fear. You call it a breakdown, but it's really a breakthrough trying to happen. Your anger is not there to destroy you. It's there to tell you where your boundaries were crossed. Your envy is not a flaw. It's a signal pointing toward a desire you've neglected. Your fear is not weakness. It's an instinct asking for awareness. Every emotion you reject hides wisdom beneath its surface, but as long as you keep judging these feelings as bad, you stay disconnected from their lessons. You become fragmented, half alive, half asleep. The parts you repress don't vanish. They act out through your behavior, through projection, through the stories you tell about others. You see in others what you refuse to see in yourself. The person you judge most harshly often mirrors the part of you that needs the most compassion. The shadow follows you until you turn around and face it. It appears in your relationships, in your failures, in your patterns that repeat again and again. It's the reason you keep attracting the same kind of pain. Life keeps bringing you mirrors until you finally recognize your reflection. The purpose of these encounters isn't to punish you, but to wake you. The world outside is only reflecting the battle within. When you hate someone's arrogance, it's because a part of you has denied your own need for confidence. When you're triggered by someone's freedom, it's because you've imprisoned yourself in caution. Every shadow projection is an invitation, not to judge, but to integrate. Integration doesn't mean indulging your darkness. It means understanding it. It means bringing light to it, not erasing it. You don't conquer the shadow by fighting it. You heal it by listening. You learn to ask your emotions what they are trying to say, instead of drowning them in distraction. You sit with your pain instead of running from it. This is not easy. It's terrifying. Because when you finally stop running, you meet the parts of yourself you swore you'd never see again. The child who felt abandoned. The teenager who was humiliated. The adult who pretends to be fine but feels invisible inside. Each of these selves lives within you, still waiting for acknowledgement. When you finally look into the shadow, something miraculous happens. The fear begins to dissolve, not because it disappears, but because it's seen. Awareness transforms everything it touches. The anger you feared turns into clarity. The envy becomes motivation. The fear becomes humility. The shadow doesn't need to be destroyed, it needs to be given a voice. What you bring to light no longer controls you. What you deny grows stronger. And that's why the shadow has power. Not because it's dark, but because it's hidden. Freedom is not found in pretending to be pure. It's found in embracing your contradictions. The one who accepts their darkness can never again be manipulated by shame. When you understand your own capacity for anger, no one can use it against you. When you recognize your envy, you stop resenting others and start learning from what you desire. When you face your fear, you stop being ruled by it. The shadow becomes your teacher, showing you where you still need to grow. But facing your shadow requires honesty, radical honesty. It means admitting that your kindness sometimes hides a desire to be liked. That your humility may disguise fear of rejection. That your morality may protect you from feeling your own impulses. It's uncomfortable, even humiliating at first. Because the ego wants to be good, admired, right? But truth doesn't care about appearance. Truth is liberation, and liberation begins where pretense ends. When you walk through the landscape of your shadow, you begin to see yourself in full color. You stop dividing life into good and bad, right and wrong, light and dark. You start seeing it as a totality, a vast spectrum of experience. You realize that your darkness was never a flaw, it was depth. Without it, your light would have no contrast. Without it, your compassion would have no roots. The shadow gives your light meaning. And slowly, you begin to reclaim the pieces of yourself that you left behind. The fire you once called anger becomes passion. The assertiveness you once feared becomes confidence. The pain you once denied becomes empathy. You start to walk through the world with more authenticity because you no longer have to hide. You no longer need to pretend to be one-dimensional. You can be soft and fierce, kind and powerful, grounded and wild, because you've stopped choosing between them. Freedom comes not from perfection, but from integration. The shadow is not a curse, it is a map. Every emotion you feared to feel points toward a hidden truth about who you are. The more you follow it, the more you return to your wholeness. What once looked like chaos becomes coherence. What once felt like brokenness becomes beauty. And though the world may still misunderstand you, you will no longer misunderstand yourself, because the shadow you once ran from was never your enemy. It was your path to freedom. Wholeness is more important than perfection. The goal isn't to become flawless, it's to become whole. Healing doesn't come from polishing yourself into an image of purity or strength. It comes from embracing every part of who you are. The light and the darkness, the beauty and the brokenness, the peace and the pain. To be whole is not to be without cracks, but to know the cracks and still call yourself complete. Perfection is a mask that hides insecurity. Wholeness is the truth that frees you from it. We live in a world obsessed with perfection. From the moment we open our eyes, we are taught to improve, fix, refine, and outgrow our flaws. We are praised for discipline, rewarded for achievements, admired for control. But beneath all the perfectionism lies fear. The fear of not being enough, the fear of rejection, the fear that if people saw our imperfections, they would no longer love us. So we learn to perform instead of live. We learn to chase ideals that are never meant to be caught. We spend our lives trying to earn the worth that was ours from the beginning. Perfection is an illusion built by comparison. It tells you that there's a finish line, that if you just work harder, look better, do more, one day you'll arrive at peace. But peace isn't found at the top of the mountain. It's found when you stop climbing long enough to breathe. Perfection is about control. Wholeness is about surrender. To be whole, you must allow yourself to be human. To cry, to fail, to fall, to begin again. You must allow yourself to hold contradictions without shame. Because life isn't neat. You can be grateful and grieving, strong and scared, confident and uncertain, all at once. Healing begins when you stop fighting what you feel. The pain you resist doesn't disappear, it burrows deeper. The sadness you avoid doesn't fade, it lingers in your body as tension. The anger you suppress doesn't die, it turns inward as guilt. Wholeness means allowing all of it, giving space to your emotions without judgment. It means saying to yourself, it's okay to feel this. Every emotion carries wisdom, every shadow carries light, but only if you're willing to look. The pursuit of perfection disconnects you from your truth. It teaches you to hide what makes you real. You wear smiles when you're exhausted. Say, I'm fine. When you're breaking, act confident when you're afraid. But this kind of strength is hollow. It's built on denial. True strength is not the absence of vulnerability. It's the courage to be seen as you are. Wholeness doesn't demand that you shine all the time. It asks that you honor the darkness too. Because without the dark, the stars would be invisible. There is a quiet power that comes from accepting your imperfections. When you no longer waste energy pretending to be perfect, you reclaim the energy to live authentically. You stop performing and start being. You realize that the cracks in your heart aren't signs of weakness. They're openings where light gets in. Every wound you've ever carried has shaped your compassion. Every mistake you've made has taught you humility. Every loss you've endured has deepened your love. Nothing is wasted in the journey toward wholeness. The perfectionist in you wants to fix everything. The past, your personality, your relationships. But healing is not about fixing. It's about integrating. It's about looking at the parts of yourself you once rejected and saying, you belong here too. The anger you feel, the fear, the insecurity, these are not flaws to erase, but parts of your humanity to understand. You begin to realize that healing isn't becoming someone new. It's remembering who you were before the world taught you to be ashamed. To be whole means to live in alignment, not performance. It means no longer dividing yourself into the person you show the world and the person you hide. It's standing in your truth, even when it's messy. It's forgiving yourself for not knowing better in the past. It's releasing the need to be impressive and choosing to be honest instead. Wholeness feels less like perfection and more like peace. A quiet acceptance that life will always be imperfect, and that's okay. When you embrace both your light and darkness, something profound happens. The war inside you begins to end. You no longer waste energy fighting parts of yourself. You no longer feel the constant pull between who you are and who you think you should be. You start to move with the flow of your own nature instead of against it. This is where real growth begins, not from self-rejection, but from self-acceptance. You begin to act from authenticity instead of fear. Wholeness also means facing your pain instead of escaping it. Most people think healing means erasing suffering, but it actually means allowing it to transform you. The pain you run from holds the lesson you need most. It shows you where your heart is still closed. It teaches you compassion. It reveals your strength. You don't need to be perfect to be at peace. You just need to be present. The mind will always whisper that you are not enough yet. It will say you must do more, earn more, become more. But the heart knows better. The heart knows that you were enough before you took your first breath. You don't have to prove your worth, you only have to remember it. The more you chase perfection, the further you move from yourself. The more you allow yourself to be whole, the closer you come to truth. Wholeness is not the end of struggle, it's the end of inner division. It's the place where you stop splitting yourself into acceptable and unacceptable, good and bad. You realize that you contain both light and shadow, and that's what makes you human. When you make peace with your duality, you no longer fear failure or judgment. You become grounded, real, alive. The goal was never to become flawless, it was to become free, and freedom only comes when you can look at every part of yourself, the proud and the ashamed, the brave and the afraid, and say, I see you. You are part of me. When you reach that place, the world can no longer control you through shame or perfectionism. You begin to live with an open heart, imperfect but whole, messy but awake, wounded but full of light. The greatest battle is within. You think your fight is with the world, with other people, with circumstances, with fate. But it's really with your own resistance. The real war is not fought with weapons or words, but with awareness. The enemy isn't outside you, it's the voice inside that fears truth. It's the inner resistance that whispers, you're not ready. Every time you try to grow, it's the hesitation that pulls you back to comfort when life calls you forward. The outer struggles are reflections of the inner conflict you've refused to face. And until you confront yourself, every victory will feel incomplete. We like to believe the world stands in our way, that it's society, luck, or timing that limits us. But when you look deeper, you see the truth. The biggest obstacle is your own mind. The fears, doubts, and excuses you carry become invisible walls around your potential. Every time you blame the outside, you give away your power. Every time you say, I can't because of them, what you're really saying is, I'm too afraid to face what's in me. The battle is not about changing the world. It's about changing your relationship with it. And that begins by mastering the self that resists change. Resistance hides in silence, disguised as logic and safety. It tells you that tomorrow will be a better day to start. It convinces you that comfort is peace, that routine is security. But comfort is the enemy of growth. Every time you choose safety over challenge, you strengthen the voice of fear and weaken the voice of truth. Resistance doesn't scream, it whispers. It seduces you with ease. It keeps you scrolling when you could be creating, talking when you could be acting, doubting when you could be becoming. And the longer you listen, the further you drift from the life you were meant to live. The battle within is subtle but relentless. It's fought in the moments when no one is watching, when you choose between honesty and avoidance, between courage and comfort, between self-discipline and self-pity. Every small choice either feeds your weakness or your strength. The world doesn't break you. Your surrender to your own resistance does. Every dream that dies doesn't die from rejection, it dies from hesitation. The truth is, the external world only mirrors the internal war. When you make peace with yourself, the world stops feeling like a battlefield. The inner enemy is not a monster, it's fear dressed as reason. It says, don't try, you'll fail. It says, don't love, you'll get hurt. It says, don't change, you'll lose yourself. But these are lies built to protect your ego. The ego fears truth because truth dissolves control. The ego thrives in illusion. The illusion of certainty, the illusion of superiority, the illusion of separation. It tells you that your worth depends on winning, achieving, or being better than others. And so you fight, you compete, you chase, not realizing that every battle outside is fueled by the war you refuse to fight inside. The moment you stop running from truth, the war begins to shift. You start to notice how your mind creates stories that justify pain, stories that defend limitation. You realize that most of your suffering is self-created, born not from what happens, but from how you resist what happens. You suffer more from your interpretation than from reality itself. When you learn to face what is, without judgment, without denial, something inside begins to free itself. Acceptance becomes your weapon, awareness your armor. The real fight is between your higher self and the shadow self that clings to fear. The higher self wants growth, the shadow wants control. The higher self wants truth, the shadow wants comfort. The higher self wants freedom, the shadow wants familiarity. Every day, you're asked to choose, not once, but in every moment. Each time you choose awareness over avoidance, you win a small victory. Each time you face discomfort instead of hiding, you reclaim power. You can't defeat the inner enemy by force. You defeat it by understanding it. Resistance loses power when you see it clearly. When you observe your fear without judging it, it starts to dissolve. When you notice your excuses as they arise, you take back control. The voice that says, "You can't," grows weaker every time you act anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear, it's moving through it. Strength isn't the elimination of weakness, it's the acceptance of it. The battle within teaches you that the world is not against you. It's reflecting you. Every challenge is a mirror showing you the part of yourself that still resists. The unfair boss, the failed relationship, the rejection, all of it is life revealing where you still need to grow. Once you stop taking it personally, you start learning from it. Life doesn't punish you, it trains you. It keeps repeating the same lesson until you finally see the truth behind it. The enemy was never them. It was the part of you that refused to listen. Freedom begins the moment you stop identifying with your fear. You are not your doubts. You are not your past. You are not the voice that tells you to give up. You are the awareness behind it, the witness who can choose differently. The more you observe the mind, the less it controls you. The more you confront your resistance, the more it weakens. The real strength lies not in conquering others, but in mastering yourself. When you realize that every external battle is a reflection of an inner one, your focus changes. You stop wasting energy fighting what's outside and start transforming what's inside. You start noticing that the same qualities you hate in others are the ones you've disowned within yourself. The world stops being an enemy and becomes a teacher. Every moment becomes an opportunity to choose growth over fear, presence over reaction, awareness over illusion. The greatest battle is not about victory or defeat. It's about awakening. When you finally face your resistance, when you stop blaming, when you turn inward and meet the voice of fear with awareness, you begin to reclaim your power. The enemy inside no longer feels like an enemy, it becomes a guide. Every shadow you face becomes light. Every fear you confront becomes wisdom. Every wound you accept becomes strength. The fight doesn't end by destroying the darkness, but by integrating it. When you understand this, you realize that the only war worth fighting was always within you. Transformation begins with honesty. Every lie you tell yourself is a chain, invisible, heavy, and self-forged. Each time you avoid your truth, you build another wall between who you are and who you could become. You tell yourself stories to feel safe, that you're fine when you're breaking, that you're in control when you're afraid, that you've moved on when you're still holding on. These lies become your prison, built not from malice but from fear. Fear of what will happen if you finally tell yourself the truth. Yet the moment you face that truth, you begin to transform. Because truth, even when it burns, is the beginning of freedom. We spend years pretending to be strong, pretending to be confident, pretending to be happy. We perform a version of ourselves that fits into the world's expectations. We tell ourselves that it's better to be liked than to be real. But the soul knows when it's living a lie. It feels the weight of suppression. It feels the exhaustion that comes from maintaining an image that doesn't match what's inside. You can lie to the world for a long time, but you cannot lie to yourself forever. Sooner or later, the truth begins to leak through the cracks. In your restlessness, in your sadness, in your dissatisfaction with everything that once made you proud. Every transformation begins in that moment of truth. The moment you finally stop running. Honesty is not a gentle act. It demands courage. It asks you to look at what you've denied, to admit what you already know, but have avoided saying out loud. It means looking at the habits that keep you small, the relationships that drain your energy, the goals that don't reflect your heart. It means asking yourself, what am I pretending not to know? The answers will hurt, but they will also heal. Because honesty is not cruelty, it's clarity. And clarity is what cuts through illusion. The lies we tell ourselves are rarely malicious. They are defenses built to protect us from pain. We lie to avoid shame, to feel in control, to keep our identity intact. We tell ourselves that it's fine to settle, that we're happy with less, that we don't care about what we secretly crave. But every denial costs energy. Every unspoken truth takes a piece of your vitality. You can't grow in falsehood because growth requires movement, and lies keep you stuck. They freeze your evolution, trapping you in an image that no longer fits who you are becoming. Honesty is the fire that melts these chains. It doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. It burns away everything that is not real. The excuses, the masks, the self-deception, until only truth remains. And truth, though uncomfortable, brings relief. The moment you admit what you've been avoiding, a strange calm follows. Because deep down, your soul has been waiting for that confession. It doesn't matter how messy the truth is, it only matters that it's real. Transformation begins when you say, "This is what I feel, this is what I want, this is what I fear." Those simple admissions open the door to change. You can't heal what you won't face. You can't move forward while pretending you're not lost. The pain of honesty is temporary, but the cost of denial is endless. The truth doesn't hurt nearly as much as the effort it takes to hide it. When you start living honestly with yourself, everything in your life begins to shift. The relationships that were built on illusion begin to fade. The goals that were built on ego begin to crumble, but what remains is real, unshakable, grounded, authentic. you begin to align with your deeper nature, not the one shaped by expectations, but the one that's been whispering beneath them all along. Honesty strips you down to your essence, and from that rawness, true transformation can begin. Honesty is also the beginning of self-love, because when you stop lying to yourself, you stop abandoning yourself. You stop pretending to be better than you are, and you stop condemning yourself for being less. You start seeing yourself clearly, not as perfect, but as human. And that clarity breeds compassion. You begin to forgive yourself for the mistakes, for the pretending, for the times you weren't ready to face the truth. You begin to see that every lie you told yourself was just an attempt to protect your heart until it was strong enough to open. Transformation through honesty doesn't happen overnight. It unfolds in layers. You start with small truths, the ones that sting but don't shatter. You admit you're tired. You admit you're afraid. You admit you want more. Then, as you grow stronger, you start facing the deeper ones. The truths about your patterns, your wounds, your self-betrayals. Each layer you peel back reveals another part of yourself that's been waiting to be seen. And with every truth you face, you shed a version of yourself that no longer serves you. The greatest shift happens when you realize that honesty is not about judgment. It's about awareness. To face your truth doesn't mean to condemn yourself. It means to wake up. You begin to see that you are not your mistakes, but the one who learns from them. You are not your past, but the one who grows beyond it. The more honest you become, the less afraid you are of yourself, because you no longer need to hide. The things you once saw as flaws become teachers. The emotions you once rejected become guides. When you live dishonestly, you live in fragments, split between who you are and who you pretend to be. But when you start telling the truth, those fragments begin to reunite. You start feeling whole again. You no longer have to perform or prove. You begin to act from authenticity, and authenticity has power. It draws the right people, the right opportunities, the right paths. Life starts aligning with your inner truth because you've stopped betraying it. Every lie imprisons you in fear, every truth sets you free. The more you face, the lighter you become. The fear that once ruled you begins to fade because fear feeds on illusion. When you stop lying to yourself, fear loses its home. What's left is freedom. Not the freedom to escape life, but the freedom to live it fully. Because transformation isn't about becoming someone new. It's about finally being honest enough to be who you really are. Freedom comes from integration. True liberation isn't about escaping pain. It's about integrating it. When you stop running from who you are, you finally become whole.